a hand-picked free-range cut of the sights and sounds of this busy day on the campaign trail.
Hello, Fayetteville. What's up, Pittsburgh?
I am very happy to be in the home of the Steelers.
In 4 days, we're going to win the great state of New Hampshire.
4 days left. 4 days left. And the stakes, this is not hyperbole, the stakes could not be higher.
Are we going to build a stronger, fairer, better America, or are we going to fear each other and the future?
Hillary Clinton is the candidate of yesterday. We are the movement of the future.
Understand the stakes here. My name's not on the ballot. But everything we've worked for is on the ballot. Justice is on the ballot. Equality is on the ballot. Jobs are on the ballot. Health care is on the ballot. Criminal justice reform's on the ballot. Democracy is on the ballot. I need you to vote.
The snapshot of public polling out today, for the most part, was rife with good news. For yesterday was rife with good news for Republican nominee Donald Trump. But today's batch, which is what we're focused on, has a little bit more favorable news for Hillary Clinton. The daily tracking poll by ABC News and the Washington Post has Clinton up 3 points among likely voters in a two-way race. That's 49 to 46%. That is, of course, still within the survey's margin of error. But Clinton's lead is 1 point higher than it was yesterday and 2 points higher than it was the day before that. Most of the state polls today looked positive for the Democratic nominee as well. Roanoke College has her up 7 points in Virginia. A Magellan poll of Colorado voters has Clinton up 6 in the Rocky Mountain state. And there's another poll from Georgia that, for the second day in a row, shows Clinton within striking distance in that perennially red state. On Donald Trump's highlight list, a third New Hampshire poll in 2 days. This one from the University of Massachusetts shows a tied race in the Granite State. That's a state Clinton considered in her column not very long ago. And Trump still leads in Iowa, this time by 3 points, a state his team has felt pretty confident about for some time. So, Mark, as we go into the weekend, this final weekend before Election Day, where does the race stand?
Fundamentals are the same. Structurally, in terms of the public data, Hillary Clinton is ahead, and she's ahead in a way where we can see many paths for her to get to 270, and very few for Donald Trump, if any, to get to 270. I will say the following things. I was at Trump Tower today doing some shooting for The Circus, our Showtime show for Sunday night. I've never seen a group of people this loose at the end of a campaign. Maybe it's an act, but they're very loose. And they say, well, we'll probably win. We think we're going to win.
Yeah.
The Clinton people all say to me, 100% we're going to win.
Yeah.
They seem a little tight.
Yeah. Well,
maybe it's because they're the front runner and their lead has gone away. But look, I'll just say one more thing. Today's data, and even the data from yesterday, mixed about each state, perhaps, still advantage Clinton. Structurally is just overwhelming still.
Let's be clear. The Trump campaign says it's going to win, regardless of what they actually believe, because what else are they going to say? Of course they're going to say they're going to win. They got to keep their candidate confident. They don't want to deflate him in any way. And who knows, he might, you might fire somebody.
They want a bandwagon effect.
They want, and they also, you just don't undercut your candidate if you think there's any chance of winning. The Clinton campaign has suffered through a barrage of bad publicity. They're coming off the last minute, maybe the last big surprise. The Comey letter. They've had a tough time, and they've been trying to gauge how much damage that and the fallout from that has done. I think now the polls have started to stabilize in a way that they're still going to be nervous because, in the end, something we've discussed on the show before, the psychology in Brooklyn is different. They spend all their time with Democrats who are telling them every day, if you lose to Donald Trump, it means the end of the world. And the Trump campaign doesn't have that same psychology. They'll always be looser.
Here's where we're back to. Michigan, Wisconsin, Colorado, whatever. It's the path to exactly 270 that we talked about that is most likely for Trump. If he can win Ohio, where he's ahead, and Iowa, where he's ahead, then he's got to win the other big three. Florida, North Carolina, tough. North Carolina, very tough. He's got to win Nevada. Then he still has to win New Hampshire. But now New Hampshire and Maine, one electoral vote in Maine, those are plausible now. They're plausible.
Yes, but look, I mean, again, just to go to the Clinton campaign, they did a conference call today where they talked about early vote. And they look at the early vote numbers in Florida, and they look at the early vote numbers in North Carolina, and they say, we're on track to win those states. And if they win either one of them, no Trump presidency.
Unless he somehow wins Michigan.
No Trump presidency.
But I agree. That's why I say the Big Five is the Big Five for a reason.
Yep.
All right. Excuse me. That is the current state of the race. Now let's take a look at the end game. There are just 4 news cycles left until America picks its next president. Between now and then, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are going to crisscross America, landing in as many states as they can. There are probably going to be a few states added to this list before the final events, but here is what we know so far about their schedules. Tomorrow, Saturday, Clinton and Trump are going to be in Florida. Trump also goes to North Carolina, Nevada, and Colorado.
Nevada.
On
Nevada.
Sunday,
Come on,
Clinton's in New
brother.
Hampshire and Ohio. Trump makes Midwestern stops in Iowa and Wisconsin. And on Monday, Clinton has her big event with the Obamas, the double date in Philadelphia. Trump is making a final pitch in North Carolina and New Hampshire. Again, expect more states to be added. On the VP side, both campaigns are deploying an army of surrogates in the next 72 hours. Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Bill Clinton, and the Obamas are all making a final plea. Of course, also Tim Kaine and Mike Pence. Trump's kids, Rick Perry, Rudy Giuliani, Sarah Palin, and others are doing the same for the GOP standard bearers. So, John, taking these scheduling moves in their totality, what is to tell you about the state of the race?
I just want to say one thing, because I know we've been going back and forth about Nevada. They're starting to mess with you now in the prompter. They're like they're putting that, they're writing it in there in a way to try to screw with you. It's Nevada, but they're messing with you. Our staff is messing with you. It's not fair, guys. Stop doing that to Mark. Look, the Trump campaign is going around. They know that they have to figure out a way to widen out the map somehow. So he's going to have a broader travel schedule over these last 72 hours. The Clinton campaign, it's striking how much they are just hammering away at some of the states we were just talking about before, that they know if they win one of them, she's going to spend a lot of time in Florida, she's going to spend a lot of time in North Carolina, and they're doing a lot in Pennsylvania, because that's the one where they feel like they have, was long thought as the bluish state, the blue state that Trump might be able to add, that if they win that one and one of these other ones, it pretty much shuts down the race. So they're like laser focused on a few states this weekend, and the Trump campaign is still looking for a wild card somewhere.
I mean, look, if Trump wins Pennsylvania, he's almost certainly going to win, because it means he'll be winning some other states.
Right.
They got to stop him from threatening there. To me, right now, the 2 states I'm most interested in are North Carolina and New Hampshire. Yeah. New Hampshire's got the kind of voters that Trump hasn't been doing particularly well with, upscale suburban voters, and North Carolina, same thing, well-educated voters. If Trump can win in those 2 states somehow, and again, the polling suggests he could win both those states, although the Democrats say North Carolina is solid, we're looking at a different map on Tuesday.
Right. Well, that's, again, I mean, there's obviously still the big 5 dynamics that we're talking about. Yeah. I'll tell you what's also just interesting as you think about the movements of these guys. The fact that Hillary Clinton, she's done now with the West. She's not going to be anywhere near Colorado. Yeah. She's not going to be anywhere near Nevada.
Helps a lot.
Because they believe that those states, forget the polling, that they believe that those states are still locked down and they don't have to go out west. She can live on the East Coast, which makes her life a lot easier in terms of covering ground over these last few days.
And there's been a lot of talk, I know the bell rang, but a lot of talk about the candidates' health. They're both older candidates. Let's see how they do here, because this is physically a tough period. Hats off to them for having such tough schedules.
She's going to live on Eastern time, and that's easier to do. All right, there's the tension between the FBI and Hillary Clinton's campaign have been front and center ever since Director James Comey sent his letter to Congress last week. Now a report by The Guardian is describing an agency with widespread internal dislike for Clinton. One current agent went so far as to call the Bureau, quote, Trumplandia, and suggested that colleagues supporting the Republican nominee were responsible for the leaks that have come out of the FBI in recent days. Apparently, they are not just talking to the press. 2 days before Comey sent his letter to Congress, former New York mayor and Trump surrogate Rudy Giuliani went on Fox News and made this cryptic prediction.
I think he's got a surprise or two that you're going to hear about in the next 2 days.
Right.
I mean, I'm talking about some pretty big surprise.
Oh, yeah, I heard you say that this morning. What do you mean?
You'll see.
Stay tuned.
So that was 2 days before Comey's letter. Now, today, Giuliani was back on Fox News, and he was asked by the hosts there what he knew and when he knew it.
I'm real careful not to talk to any on-duty active FBI agents. I don't want to put them in a compromising position. But I sure have a lot of friends who are retired FBI agents, close personal friends. This has been going on since July, since the day Comey did this. I heard were former FBI agents telling me that there's a revolution going on inside the FBI, and it's now at a boiling point. And
so you had a general idea that something was coming?
I had expected this for the last, honestly, to tell you the truth, I thought it was going to be about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Today, Democratic Congressman Elijah Cummings and John Conyers called on the Inspector General to investigate the FBI leaks referencing Rudy Giuliani's comments. And speaking of Fox, the network's anchor Brett Baer, apologized today for reporting earlier this week that there was, quote, a likely indictment looming in the FBI probe of the Clinton Foundation for Hillary Clinton. So, Mark, this FBI saga continues. What impact do you think the FBI business will have on the final days of this race?
You know, people have started to speculate about the implications if Hillary Clinton wins of certain things. I think she's going to have to repair a relationship with the FBI, if she can, with Comey. The FBI, a lot of FBI agents have never liked the Clintons. I think that, you know, the Trump people are right about one thing. The earned media, the news flow, is still filled with stuff, at minimum, to energize the right, about WikiLeaks, about the Comey investigation, et cetera. And so I think at a minimum, it gives Republicans still, all the way through Tuesday, now it's clear, because there's nothing bigger in the earned media, something to talk about.
Look, I want to step. We said last Friday, we both agreed it was inappropriate for James Comey to issue this letter, just as it was inappropriate for him to hold that big media availability back in July when he decided not to press any charges against Hillary Clinton or to indict her. What's happened in the last week at the FBI, the stories about these leaks, the stories about Trumplandia, the fact that the Rudy Giuliani apparently got tipped off by somebody, whether a former agent or a current one, this is destroying the credibility of the FBI. To have the FBI in the middle of a presidential election in a political way, where many Americans are coming to the conclusion that the FBI, again, or at least some faction of the FBI, has its thumb on the scale this close to an election day, is a huge ongoing problem for this agency. And James Comey, whether he's personally responsible for certain things, but he's also let this agency get out of control in a way that is really damaging to a really important American institution.
Yeah, and to the election.
Yeah, well, yes.
Comey set it off. It's a horrible thing. I wish he could fix it. He can't. Up next, we'll take a spin through some more of today's headlines and what they might mean for the presidential race when we come right back. He's not done very much as a surrogate for Trump of late. When he is out, he's obviously one of the more effective surrogates that Trump has. But again, just to go back to the more core thing about this, I think that, you know, this Bridgegate thing and how it's all played out, it's again, we're talking about undermining Comey, undermining the FBI's credibility. Chris Christie's damaged goods, I think, by all of this. And he's not going to be able to put this to rest. You know, if Trump wins, the guy who's running the transition is a guy who really has inflicted, I think, really significant political damage on his ability to be a credible person doing that, let alone be like the Attorney General of the United States in a Trump administration. Yeah, I agree. It has more implications later.
Yes,
Trump
not so much this weekend, but down the line.
You know, and how I don't think Christie would have been that strong a surrogate over the weekend. As you said, he's been off the trail. So this is something people have been watching all year for its impact. I think in the end, impacts in New Jersey, not a big deal for Governor Christie or for Donald Trump today, between now and Tuesday.
Yeah, most of the impact of that has already been felt in Chris Christie's life. All right, today we got the final Labor Department jobs report before Election Day. The U.S. economy added 161,000 new jobs in October. Like past months, that is decent growth, but fewer than the month before. Unemployment rate, though, fell slightly to 4.9%. First time the rate's been under 5 in a long, long while, since back before the financial crisis. At a campaign event in Pittsburgh today, Hillary Clinton said the numbers depict an economy, quote, ready to take off. Donald Trump, by contrast, dubbed the news proof of, quote, the Obama economic disaster. So, Mark, what, if any, role do you think these numbers will play in these final days of the race?
I mean, the economy, there's plenty of data that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama can talk about here in the end about things improving. These are not mega numbers, but they're solid. And the president's approval rating is up. You know, Donald Trump likes to go around saying he's so unpopular, but his approval rating is about the third highest it's been since his time in office. So I think this gives Democrats a plausible way in these final days to say, stay the course. You may not like the macro direction of the country, but stay the course. Things are not going backwards. They're getting at least incrementally better.
This is just the simplest thing in the world. You know, the unemployment rate, when it's going down, And when it's at a milestone of some kind, it's the first time it's been below 5% in a decade, basically. That's good news for the party in power. Caveat all you want. Yeah. She's going to say, hey, look, the Obama thing might be moving too slow. You might be frustrated. There's bigger macro problems. But in the end, we're making slow and steady progress. We're adding new jobs for the umpteenth month in a row. And again, it's reflected, as you point out, in Barack Obama's approval rating. It just makes him all the stronger as a surrogate.
And I'll say one last thing, which is, had the numbers been really bad,
of course,
it would have been very good for the Republicans, obviously.
100%. 100%.
It's better for the Democrats in the negative than in the positive, but it's good in the positive. All right. Finally, of course, a Friday WikiLeaks update. No huge news here either, but in new hacked emails that purport to be from the inbox of Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, the aforementioned John Podesta, an aide to Bill Clinton pushed back against creating conflict of interest rules at the family's foundation, saying such rules would pose problems for the former president. In another email, Clinton campaign communications director Jennifer Palmieri appears to call James Comey, quote, a bad choice to head the FBI. WikiLeaks was just one of 5 potential types of hacks that the legendary David Sanger of the New York Times wrote the American public might have to worry about in conjunction with Tuesday's election. The others, he said, include interfering with voter rolls, manipulating the vote tally that gets reported to news organizations, tinkering with voting machines, and a general internet disruption that would keep the public in the dark and potentially away from polling places. So, John, based on the previous hacks and potential future hacks, where do those stand? Not a huge Friday surprise, but where do they stand between now and Tuesday?
I think all of the rest of the things we heard, all the things on that list are basically background noise at this point. We know these last 72 hours, you'd have to have a big thing to really break through. None of those things qualify. I think some of the foundation stuff could be a real problem for Hillary Clinton if she becomes president of the United States, and that will linger. This hacking thing, though, as you know, I went down and talked to Sanger a couple weeks ago for the circus, and I'm freaking out a little bit about what might happen. This may all turn out to be like Y2K, but there are enough different ways that this election could get messed with on Election Day that I'm feeling a little apprehension about what's going to happen on Tuesday.
Super hopeful that our federal government is all over this.
Yeah. All right, coming up, we have a window into Donald Trump's latest visit to Wisconsin. We'll be right back for that.
Left Gotham City this week, spent some time out on the campaign trail talking to voters, covering candidates. That included a Tuesday evening rally Donald Trump did in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. The Republican nominee making a last-minute appeal there, the voters in the blue-leaning Badger State. We covered the event in part for our Showtime documentary series produced in cooperation with Bloomberg Politics, The Circus. Airs Sunday night at 8 o'clock. Here's a bit of that. As the political analyst Willie Nelson said, on the road again. We're going to Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and it's part of Donald Trump's last-minute blue state tour. Trump has got to figure out a way to build a coalition, get Republicans to come home, and win enough independents and blue-collar Democrats to win a state Republicans haven't won in a long time. Eau Claire, like Wisconsin, seems to be pretty divided. We've seen protests throughout the campaign, but there's large numbers who feel compelled to come out because emotions are running high, tensions are running high, and this is a state that Republicans are trying to put pressure on. The fact that in the last week you got Trump coming here means they either think they can win it, or it means they've run out of options to try to get 270 electoral votes.
Please give a warm welcome to the next president of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
Thank you very much. Great people. Great state. Thank you, everybody. We're on the cusp of something incredible. We are the bright future. And I say we. It's we. I'm a messenger. I'm only a messenger, remember. I'm only a messenger, but you have to say I'm doing a pretty good job as a messenger. Yeah. She is the candidate of yesterday. We are the movement of the future. We are. We are just, listen to this, after all of this time, 1 week. 1 week, you believe it? Thank you, everybody. I will not disappoint you, that I promise. God bless you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
This event represents all that's going right with the Trump campaign right now. Trump was confident, sentimental. He's got all these lines now about change. This is about the voters, not him. This is the kind of general election candidate a lot of his supporters wish he'd been all along. He could still lose. He could still lose badly. But if he keeps this up, he's going to put a lot of pressure on Hillary Clinton. A lot of political bold-faced names. I covered Bill Clinton. I covered Rudy Giuliani. Yeah. You were out with Evan McMullen and
a bunch of strategists in California. I just want to ask you about Wisconsin, though. It's just amazing. Trump didn't win Wisconsin, and there was so much resistance to him among Republican establishmentarians. Has that changed now in the state? Like the parties really actually all rallied behind him?
I mean, that event had not just Scott Walker, but Ron Johnson, the Senate candidate, incumbent Republican senator, who'd not appeared with Trump at all and did at this event, or at least at the same event.
Fascinating. You
can see the whole episode of The Circus this Sunday night on Showtime, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. When we come back, we spice things up. The Republican Party, Sean Spicer, is with us right after the break.
Joining us now from the Republican National Committee headquarters in Washington, D.C. is RNC Communications Director and Chief Strategist Sean Spicer. Sean, taking a look, here we are on Friday before Election Day, taking a look at all the data, everything you know right now about the race. Is Donald Trump now the favorite, or is he still the underdog?
I think he's still the underdog, but I think everything that we're seeing both nationally and in the states is trending his way, and that's a great place to be. You know, going into the last 4 days, I'd rather have the wind at our back and all the momentum with us than not.
Sean, tell us what you think the most likely electoral college path is for Donald Trump right now, besides the Romney states minus North Carolina.
So Florida, Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina, I think there. And then I think we start to pick off. Colorado's down to dead even. Michigan's dead even. Those are my two top. But I think you look at right below the surface there and a close, you know, what would that be? Third is Virginia is in the mix. I think New Hampshire and Maine, too, I feel really good about. But I think, and that's sort of the story of this, which is that the map keeps expanding. And a lot more of these states are within the margin of error. And like I said, there's not one that's not trending in our direction. And when you look at where Hillary Clinton, the Democrats are spending their time and their money, they're seeing the same data that we are, guys. I mean, they're in Colorado, they're in North Carolina, they're doubling down in a lot of these places because I think that they've started to see this map expand. I mean, Virginia, they pulled out. It's now within the margin of error. Colorado, they pulled out, margin of error. Michigan, dead even. New Hampshire, dead even. Over and over again, these guys got really cocky, pulled out, and then Donald Trump, in a message of change, is sort of blowing right into these solidly blue states in most cases, and in every case, states that Obama carried twice.
Sean, we've watched Trump over the course of the last few days. He's had messages that have ranged from sort of soaringly optimistic by his standards and his typically kind of negative attacks on Hillary Clinton. What are we going to see from him in the last 72 hours? Or is it going to be weighted more towards the positive, or is he going to spend most of his time still trying to take Hillary Clinton out?
I think it's a majority of positive. He's just, you know, he's going to talk about the opportunity to change Washington and the change that he brings and the opportunities to make America great again. But I think he's going to make sure that he continues to let people understand that contrast and doesn't keep the foot on the gas on that aspect of it.
Sean, you and Chairman Priebus have come under some criticism from some Republicans who said you shouldn't have been so supportive of Donald Trump as he moved towards the nomination. Any regrets on your part or the chairman's part about the role you've played in helping Donald Trump since back in the spring?
No, zero. And I'll tell you why, because it's not our decision. We made very clear that this is the voters. Donald Trump got more votes than any Republican seeking this office before. It is not our job. It is not anyone's job in Washington to second guess that. And I think that's the reality of this. He bested 16 other candidates. He was the choice of millions and millions of Republican voters. And that's our job. That is fundamentally the job of the Republican National Committee, to support people who win the nomination in the Republican Party and make sure that they win, not to second guess the voters, not to say Washington knows better. So we did that, and we have the best ground game and data operation that this party, frankly, either party has seen, and that's what's going to put us to over the top on November 8th.
Sean, last question. You guys are getting some criticism. Rudy Giuliani is today for seeming to have been filled in or tipped off about FBI Director Comey's letter last Friday. Just tell us what you can tell us about the campaign, the extent to which the campaign had some idea that that letter was coming.
I'm fully unaware that anyone had any knowledge of that. So at least from my perspective and from the RNC perspective, I had no idea it was coming. But again, I think one of the things, John, that's important is all of the focus on the FBI and Director Comey and would he or could he. None of this would be happening if Hillary Clinton hadn't done what she did. She held a secret server. It was accessed by Anthony Weiner. I mean, none of those actions could have happened if it wasn't for her actions in the first place, for her cover-ups, for her repeated lies. Nothing would have happened if it wasn't for Hillary Clinton's actions over and over again, doing the things that she did to mislead the American people and cover things up.
All right. If we had more time, we'd spend a lot more time on this issue, Sean, and maybe we will before Election Day. Thank you for doing the show. Let's bring in now a Democratic voice, a strategist and former Deputy White House Press Secretary, Bill Burton, who joins us from Los Angeles. Bill, it's great to see you. I'm going to start with you with the question I just ended up with Sean. As you look at the interchange, what Rudy Giuliani predicting the Comey letter, predicting a big thing about to happen, the Comey letter then coming out, and then today going on television and talking about, seeming to suggest that he's talking to a lot of former FBI agents who tipped him off about the fact that letter was forthcoming. What do you make of that, and how problematic do you think it is?
Well, look, I think that these issues overall are already baked into the equation. Like, if you love Hillary Clinton, you don't think it's a big deal. Well, you think it's a big deal that Rudy Giuliani got tipped off, probably. If you like Donald Trump, you don't care that he got tipped off, but you think the emails are a big deal. I think that none of this is going to move the needle at all. It's just it's some of the mishigash at the end. Now, from a criminal standpoint, I think Rudy Giuliani probably has a problem. Or the FBI agents who are leaking him information probably have a problem that's going to be dealt with in due course. But from a political standpoint, I don't think that this moves one voter one way or the other.
Bill, if Hillary Clinton wins, do you think she'll have a problem in her relationship with the director, who in theory will be staying on to finish out his term?
It does seem like it would be pretty awkward to be in the room for their first meeting. I mean, he clearly stumbled his way through this. He has not acquitted himself well on the political sense, which is a big part of the job of the FBI director, is to be able to navigate that.
Should she
you're the director of a huge law enforcement.
to submit his resignation if she wins?
I'm not going to second guess what Hillary Clinton wants to do in terms of her FBI director should she become president, but I certainly don't think that he has the confidence of the American people anymore, considering how he's acted throughout this.
So should President Obama call for his resignation?
Again, I'm not there. I don't know what President Obama knows. I know that people have very little confidence in his ability to navigate politics. But in terms of whether or not he should lose his job, that's for others to decide.
So, Bill, we're looking at a lot of data right now from the early vote, and I hear Democrats on every side of this issue. Forget about the Clinton campaign. Some Democrats looking at the early vote numbers and saying, man, we're performing really well. Gives us a lot of confidence about places like Florida, North Carolina, Nevada. Other Democrats freaking out over the fact that she seems to not be performing strongly enough with some core Democratic constituencies. So when you look at it, where are you?
Well, look, there's a lot of ways to slice this. I think if you look at the aggregate poll numbers, you look at the early voting data, it certainly suggests that certain states are just out of reach for Donald Trump at this point. And if you believe that Nevada is out of reach for Donald Trump, this race is essentially over. So every single day that's gone by, I've gotten more and more confident. That said, I've also gotten more and more nauseous about the prospect of Donald Trump potentially becoming president of the United States. But I think that the numbers and logic suggest that Hillary Clinton is going to be just fine on Tuesday night, and the race will get called early in the night. That's my prediction.
Bill, if you do nothing else for the next 3 days, just make sure you pack in some Pepto-Bismol, because you're going to have a few more difficult days. Bill Burton, thank you for being on the show with us. My interview with entertainer and comedian George Lopez is next. If you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can listen to us on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM, and we'll be right back. The stand-up comic and sitcom star George Lopez is one of America's most famous Hispanics and one whose stand-up act does not shy away from politics. So you might have thought that Lopez would have been interviewed frequently about the presidential race this year, and especially about Donald Trump, whose harsh and incendiary and sometimes outright racist comments about Latinos have been a central storyline in this campaign. But when I ran into Lopez recently at a playoff game at Wrigley Field and asked him about whether he'd been asked much about this election, he said, in fact, very few journalists had asked him to talk about it at all. So we here decided to remedy that situation stat. And George and I sat down to talk yesterday out in Los Angeles, and he started out by telling me that it wasn't just the media who had failed to seek him out in 2016.
You know, it's interesting, you know, in 2008, Barack Obama specifically, you know, personally reached out and called me and asked me. He didn't know where I was politically, what my motives, my interests were, and he said, "Listen, if you don't mind, I would appreciate if you'd help me, you know, secure a Latino base and the Latino vote." At 12, he came back and did the same thing. I haven't heard from the Clinton campaign. And I have a powerful voice. You know, my social media platform is high. You know, people respect my opinion when I'm political. Some people don't agree with it, particularly this election. But it's definitely a voice that isn't as loud as it was in 8 and 12.
Yeah, I'm going to read you a few things here that Donald Trump has either said or done that have some relationship to Mexicans or Mexican Americans.
Great.
And then I'm going to read them to you all real quick, and then we'll talk about it. All right. This to me is the campaign and Trump's relationship with the Hispanic community. Okay.
Yeah.
Started out by saying that they're criminals and rapists. He kicked Jorge Ramos out of a news conference. He tweeted a taco bowl on Cinco de Mayo. Our producers ate one. They said it was disgusting. He said that Judge Gonzalo Curiel couldn't do his job because he was Mexican, even though he wasn't actually Mexican. He was born in Indiana.
Right.
He retweeted a comment about Jeb Bush where he said, quote, "Jeb Bush has to like illegals because of his wife." And then in the last debate, he talked about bad hombres. So hearing all of that and watching Donald Trump's rise to become the Republican nominee, what did you think as all that played out?
Well, you know, I from the get-go, from the elevator ride down to the Mexicans, criminals and rapists, which I put in my act, and I'm sure some of them are good people. The wall, as if we had never heard of the internet or an airplane, or or tunnels that almost collapse the ground. But you know, I'm not in favor of open borders, and I'm not in favor of demonizing an ethnic group. And it has been all of that. And you know, you're right. We don't have the voice that comes out and says, "This can't be done. This isn't right." Nobody risks, even the politicians wouldn't risk their base for us. You know, so if we don't risk our own future on ourselves, then I don't think that economically we have a lot of power, but cohesively we're lagging way behind. And if it doesn't show up in this election because of everything that you just read, then we really got big problems.
Do you think if you think about all those things that Trump has said or done, is it to you is it, for a lot of people they just think he's a racist, right? So is Donald Trump a racist, you think, or no?
No, I just think he's a guy that has had a life of privilege. You know, he's never had to really respond to anything or answer to anything. If somebody would question him, he probably got rid of him. So if you look at the way he's talked about women, he's talked about African Americans, he talked about people who were gay and especially Latinos. You know, when you're up at the top of the Trump Tower, you know, everything looks small to you. So I would say that, I wouldn't say, you know, the R word is thrown, racist is thrown around with everything. They even tell me at the pound, like when you adopt pets, that the black ones are the last ones to go. Like, you know, an animal shelter will say, you know, they're the last ones to get like, okay, they can't be in pets too. So I just think that there's that guy who has been given everything that doesn't know what it's like to work for something that it's not even taking liberty with the language. That's just the way he talks.
Right. One of the reasons why I think you've been so successful and why you're such an exemplar of your community is that you're close to it still, right? You know, you hang out with
absolutely.
I mean, you're not like living in Bel Air, right? You're a guy who's like, you know, you're hanging out with your community. You're close to the community, close to your family. Trump says Mexicans love him. He says Hispanics love him. So what, do you, again, among all the Hispanics you know, is there a lot of love for Donald Trump?
There's not a lot of, I don't think we could agree even if we kidnapped him what to do with him. So I'm going to say we don't love him. And I'm going to say that there are, Latinos that are for Trump. There's one guy that's Latino for Trump. I saw one that said woman, like one woman, not women. Yeah. Woman for Trump. I saw that. There's just one woman. So I would say that I've never seen a political candidate mocked more and disrespected more than Donald Trump. Yeah. And I hope that those memes and unflattering pictures turn into votes.
Right, well, you can find a lot of them on your Instagram account.
They're all over mine.
You were a big supporter of Barack Obama.
I was.
Hillary Clinton, you're going to vote for her?
I am.
With enthusiasm?
No. I think the immigration problem is probably laid at the feet of Barack Obama because in 2008, we campaigned an album campaign based on, helping them create a pathway to citizenship. And in 8 it didn't happen, and in 12 he mentioned it and didn't do anything. So my only beef with him would be that, we were the deciding factor, maybe in 12, and didn't see, not that we were expecting a benefit from it, but this whole, I'm sure some of them are great people. We're going to build a wall, build that wall, chance and all that. He's responsible for, I think, a large portion of that.
He, Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Yeah. His failure to
absolutely, and he's deported a lot of people. Like people don't know that he's probably the president that's deported the most amount of people. Yeah. But criminals, yes, and people who are here working honestly, there has to be a way for them to be able to get on the path, at least to stay.
I want to ask you about Hillary again because you didn't really answer that question. But do you feel like regretful now that you supported Obama, given that he failed on the immigration
No, I wouldn't say regretful. I mean, I made my choice. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I wouldn't. I wouldn't be, the Clinton campaign didn't reach out. That's one thing. Yeah. But I don't know if I would be as enthusiastic for her as much as I'm enthusiastic for people to get out and vote. Right. I'm more concerned about raising the voter turnout than about voting or particularly campaigning for Hillary Clinton.
Right. So you're like a lot of Americans, right, who will vote for Hillary Clinton mostly because it's a vote against Trump rather than a vote for her.
Right. Right. I would do that. I would say that.
Yeah. Let me ask you one last question, which is on the 2 tickets, we have one candidate, Tim Kaine, who whips out that Mexican thing all the time.
Never.
He's constantly speaking Spanish. Man. What do you think about that?
You couldn't order Chipotle with that Spanish. You'd have to just order by numbers. That's not. It might be Spanish to him. It's not Spanish to us.
All right. Okay. This is a man who George Lopez, man, speaking his heart and tell him the truth.
I'm trying to tell the truth.
You're about as much like the average American as Donald Trump is, in the sense that you have a pretty good life right now, and yet the way you're looking at this election though is like the way a lot of Americans are, which is really not liking Donald Trump, kind of holding your nose and voting for Hillary Clinton, and just kind of praying that maybe we get through this whole thing and it turns out okay.
Yeah, I would say if it was a party, I might hang around because there might be a fight toward the end.
A big league and a bigly thanks to George Lopez. We'll be right back.
close out the Friday episode, shall we, with the national political reporter for Real Clear Politics, Caitlin Huey-Burns, a.k.a. CHB. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
What are you wondering about?
That is my nickname.
What are you wondering about this weekend? What are the things you think, I wish I knew the answer to this?
I want to know what's going to happen in Pennsylvania, what's going to happen in Florida, because those are two states that Donald Trump is really targeting right now. So when you look at the electoral map, we all know that he has to sweep the Romney states, pick up all the necessary battlegrounds, and then flip potentially a blue state. And what's been interesting to me over the past couple of days is looking at New Hampshire, which has last week he was behind by 8 points, and now it's a tied race at this point. So that's one of those states he really needs. And also that congressional district in Maine is going to play a big role potentially.
Just explain this to me. The Clinton campaign is kicking off tomorrow night. They're doing Katy Perry in Philadelphia, right? Mm-hmm. They're ending their campaign back in Pennsylvania again on Monday night with the Obamas. Pennsylvania has been fool's gold for Republicans for a long time in a very strong Democratic state. So are they worried? Is that what's going on?
Well, what's interesting about Pennsylvania is there's no early voting. And so the Clinton campaign has been focusing right now on the states with early voting. They've been sending surrogates there. Clinton has been going to places like Florida and North Carolina, where I was last week, big states for early voting. Pennsylvania is always really key in that final stretch. As you mentioned, it is kind of this mirage for Republicans. This time, though, you know, as we've been talking about all cycle, Trump is appealing to a certain part of the electorate there, and it's kind of split into two states, right? The Philadelphia, and Melania was there in the Philadelphia suburbs yesterday. So it's a 3-point race in our average. It's considered a toss-up. I still think it's a stretch, but it's one of those places for Republicans. Yeah. But it's one of those places you just can't take for granted, especially when everybody is voting on Election Day.
Right. So if you look at Pennsylvania, Colorado, Wisconsin, Michigan, the kind of big states that the Trump campaign is making an effort in here, you got a hunch of which one they're, if any, they're most likely to win?
You know, Michigan is really interesting to me because Hillary Clinton went to Detroit this week, which is really important. So that kind of signals that she's kind of focused on getting out of the
fight against Sanders. She was ahead in the polling and then lost it.
Exactly. Michigan has been a surprise. Donald Trump certainly has an appeal there. The race is not as close there as it is in some of these others. But if you are looking at those states that you mentioned, that could potentially be the next best bet. And just because Clinton is kind of worried about that potential surprise.
Also, I guess you think about the demography there. So Michigan got a lot in common with Ohio.
Yeah,
it's doing well.
It has more diverse areas, I would say. I mean, I was in Ohio last week, too, in the Cleveland area, talking to people who were early voting. That's certainly a big push in Ohio. We've seen the polls favor Donald Trump in recent days, but Clinton is there tonight with Jay-Z, of course, potentially Beyonce, trying to drive up young people, African-American voters there. Also
why are
trying
we
to
not
pick
there?
up. Exactly. I came back too soon.
On C-SPAN.
Why are we
on C-SPAN and MTV?
What are we doing here?
Oh, there you go.
Watching on cable.
Yeah.
I asked you at the beginning what you were watching for. What do you think most worries the Clinton campaign as we head into the final weekend?
Well, I think because this race is narrowing, because Trump actually has some potential paths now. Last week, it was really, really difficult to see how he could possibly pull this off. Now there are some options for him. I still think the fundamentals of this race favor Clinton. The Electoral College map favors Clinton at this point. But looking at states like New Hampshire closing in, Florida is still close, although they're seeing potential in the early voting numbers.
Would a blowout on either side surprise you at this point?
I think it actually would. At this point, just given what we're seeing in the polls this close, and given that we've seen a pretty tumultuous news cycle with the news last week, and both sides really driving the negative message home against the other, kind of shows how close this is.
Right. Okay. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the weekend. Try to figure it all out. John and I will be right back.
I love the last 72 hours of a presidential campaign, and I know you and I are both going to be out on the road this weekend with the respective candidates flying around. What are you most looking forward to this weekend?
Napping between campaigns.
Okay, fair enough.
No, seeing what lines work. You know, from Iowa and New Hampshire onward, listening to the stump speeches and seeing how the crowds react. And some of the crowds this weekend will certainly be the faithful, but some are going to be people still trying to figure out who to pick.
I'm looking forward to getting back up to New Hampshire with Hillary Clinton over this weekend. All right, head to BloombergPolitics.com right now for an update on how Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are doing in the final days of early voting. Coming up on Bloomberg Technology, former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer. Until Monday, from Mark and me, we have one word for you. Same word as always. Sayonara.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of First Word News. One New York City police sergeant is dead, another wounded after a shootout with a robbery suspect in the Bronx. Authorities say the gunman was also killed. He'd reportedly fired on officers who stopped his car following a brief pursuit. The